There was once a boy called Durgan. Now, Durgan was a bit of a strange lad. Some might even call him weird. He was one of those that thought in a different way from everybody else, and so that made most people suspicious of him. But the one thing that Durgan liked above all was stories. And that was just as well, because the village that he lived in, everybody told stories. They would gather around in the evenings, and there they would share tales. But the stories were always about the same thing. They were about the unseen terror. Now, the old man of the village, well, he would get up and go, "Oh, the unseen terror. It's as tall as 50 trees. It's as wide as 80 houses. And before you can blink, it'll crush your bones." And when he finished his story, everybody would give a little ripple of applause. But his wife would sit there sucking her tongue. "Oh, you always get it wrong. Of course it's not as wide as 80 houses. It's invisible. It has 100 heads. And as soon as you think to look at it, suddenly it rips the flesh from your bones." And another little ripple would come, and somebody else would turn up and tell the story of the unseen terror with its enormous great hairy arms, or with its 30 legs, or with its huge great big axe, or with its spider-like or snake-like or maybe even lion-like body. You see, each person told the story of the unseen terror as they imagined their own fears. Now, Durgan, he was a nervous lad, and his mum had always said that if you were going to overcome this anxiety, you should face your fears. But listening to all these stories about the unseen terror, how could you face something you didn't know what it looked like? So after one storytelling session, he went up to the old man of the village and he said, "Do you know what the unseen terror really looks like?" And the old man started to laugh, grabbing hold of his belly, rocking backwards and forwards, tears coming down his face, and he said, "Of course I don't know what the unseen terror really looks like. I'm not so stupid to go off looking for it." And Durgan thought on this, and he thought on it all night long, until the sun started to pierce the night sky. And he picked up a few of his favourite belongings. He tied them in a kerchief, slung them over his back, and he decided that he would set off to go and find out what the unseen terror really looked like. His mother stood there weeping, trying to convince him not to go, and everybody else in the village, well, they laughed at him and thought he was as mad as a badger. Well, off he went. And he wandered this way and that way and that way and this way, day after day after day, until he came to a place where they were just finishing off the roofs of the houses. And he looked around and he said, "What are you doing?" And the man looked down and he said, "Well, about a year ago, the unseen terror came through here and tore the village to pieces." "Ah," said Durgan, "really? Can you tell me what it looked like?" "No," said the man. "Not a person is left alive who knows what the unseen terror looks like." But Durgan now knew he was on the trail, and so he bid farewell and he carried on walking and walking and walking, and after a little while longer, he came to a place where they were rebuilding walls. And he asked what had happened, and they said that about 6 months ago the unseen terror had come and torn the village apart. And so Durgan said, "Do you know what it looks like?" And the man shook his head and said, "Not a person is left alive who knows what the unseen terror really looks like." And so Durgan carried on walking further and further. Days had now turned into weeks, had now turned into months. And now he came to a place where there was nothing but ash. And there was a woman in amongst all the ash, weeping. All the soot on her face was streaked where the tears had cleansed it. And she explained that just a few weeks ago the unseen terror had been through and had ruined and wrecked the village. Durgan very quietly, very shyly asked if she had seen the unseen terror, and she shook her head and said, "No, I was visiting my cousin that day, and I am the only person left from my village." Durgan walked further and further until he came to a place that now was on fire. There was a limb here and a leg there, and pools of blood and splattering everywhere, and no one was left alive to ask, and he knew that very, very recently the unseen terror had been there. And so he carried on walking until he came to a lonely mountain, and there on that mountain he looked and he searched, and that's when he heard it. He heard a sound that was as loud as, it was also as quiet as, well, whatever that sound was, it made Durgan turn. And when he turned, there, coming around the edge of the mountain, was the unseen terror, heading straight for him. Durgan's feet, they planted onto the floor, frozen. His whole body became like a statue as the unseen terror came closer and closer. The colour drained from Durgan's face, out through his body and down through his toes, until he was as still and as white as marble. And still the unseen terror came with its great big, well, I don't know what it had, because you see, I wasn't stupid enough to go looking for it, but Durgan was. And he's still there on that mountainside to this very day, still as a statue, white as marble, staring at the place where the unseen terror once was. I say once was, because it's not there anymore. It's out there somewhere. Sweet dreams.